Hi, welcome to the channel. Today is day 3 of daily targets for mains. As we discussed yesterday, for the GS preparation part, we are preparing society and social justice. I gave you a couple of targets on how to approach these subjects, and we finished with them in less than 10 days, including at least one revision. What I'm going to do today is drill down more into how that has to be done. This was the topic, this was the time given, roughly 4 hours a day. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a demo breakup of how you are supposed to do it. So let's go there. I told you that for the 4 hours that you give for GS preparation every day, 2 hours are for reading the topic if you are unfamiliar with it, and 2 hours are for actual revision of the topic. And to divide all the topics in 2 hours block. So what I have done here today is give you those 2 hours block. Topics like women, globalization, salient features, these are big topics. They require an easy 1.5 hours to finish. So they have their own day. Plus you get really exhausted when you finish this topic and really don't want to look at anything else. So rather than the complete 2 hours, even if they finish in 1 hour 30 minutes, I've given them a separate block. This subcategorization of topics I've taken from the HTRI's website. There might be some differentiation in each coaching's subtopics, but more or less the substance remains the same, and the time difference also is not that much. So if you want, you can just use this template also. As you have seen, I have not taken every topic separately. Topics which go together are also done together. For example, communalism, regionalism and secularism. These topics, if you look at their PYQs, what they require is a bit of a conceptual understanding before you write them. In and itself, these topics, when you read them in the from the books, they're pretty easy and direct. But if you look at the questions, they can be a bit convoluted. What they require is not only an understanding of facts, but an application of them and interconnectedness. You cannot answer secularism without knowing facets of communalism, sometimes even regionalism. Similarly, for these topics, you also need things like caste and understanding of Indian tradition. So when question comes from such topics, it's very hard to categorize them as one or the other. So these have to be studied together and practiced together more or less. So this is the breakdown. Rather than giving you the 7-day one, I have made it a 10-day breakdown so that you can decide your pace and study accordingly. This, as I told you before, includes reading GS2 topics along with GS1. For example, this is poverty and development issues. This is GS1. This is issues related to poverty and hunger. This is GS2. More or less the topics are same. Some dimensions changes. How you approach answering the question changes, but the factual part doesn't change. So you can study them accordingly. Now what I'm going to do today is give you another demo on how to study. As I told you yesterday, don't make notes by revision. What you need to be able to do is make notes, revise more. This plan. So I'm going to show you again using communalism. See, as I showed you, this is communalism's after first reading. I have highlighted based on PYQs. This is some of the questions that were directly asked from communism. Please remember that the topics, especially in society, are interconnected. Just because a question doesn't mention the word communalism doesn't mean the question cannot pertain to it. But what I've done here is taken only the questions which had used the word communalism to make it easier. Okay, if you will see, so the questions are somewhat direct. The impact of post-liberal, that means 1990s, on ethnic identity and communalism. Similarly, this one, communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. They have told you causes of communalism, and you have to tell whether it's a correct cause or not and give examples. Distinguish between religiousness and communalism. Now this will be one of the basics of communalism, because at what point does being religious converts to being communalist? You have to give example of how one transfers to other. So even on the basis of these 3 questions, what you understand is that questions are not that convoluted here, but you should have a lot of examples to substantiate your point, and you should be able to have conceptual understanding of the points. So now let's get to it. You have done the first reading. What I've given you here is an example of what, on the basis of the PYQs, you were supposed to highlight. One is a definition, always a definition in these types of questions. You need definition, you need causes, you need what government has already done and what can be done. This is the basic. It can include also types of things. Plus from the 3 questions, it's very clear that examples are very important. Here is where your current affairs come into the picture. In this particular case, first let me show you how how much is given in the booklet and then what you could have done. See, most of the coachings or reading materials have examples, but those examples are mostly repeated by everybody, so they're not fresh. Once you have revised this part, what you do is, using your Mains 365 or some other book or newspaper, you enrich your answer with an example. So let's see on the first page. You need a definition, you need it by a credible source, so you use them both. According to whom? That's the first thing you need to remember. On this page, 2 definitions were given. One was the Ram Ahuja and one was the Bipin Chandra. I chose the Bipin Chandra one. I liked that more. So you need to know who gave the definition and the definition. In this question that we discussed, communalism and religiousness, you could have started the introduction with this. Bipin Chandra defines communalism as this, and then go on to how, with what step the religiousness changes to communalism. Similarly, for this question, communalism causes, you could have used the definition to start the answer. So the first thing you learn, definition and by authoritative source. Second thing you learn is types. I would suggest, based on the questions, types of or forms of communalism is not that important. They have given an answer, but I don't think you just need to understand these words. You don't need to learn it. You can if you want to, but this is not important based on the questions that have been asked till date. What you do need to know is these examples. Why? These can be used for other things also. Let's see. One of the examples is Ghure called tribals backward Hindus. Yeah, Lord Buddha was considered incarnation of Lord Vishnu. These could have been assimilation communalism used in, I think, this question. The third one. Or the other example of these can be used as positives of communalism. Then there is secessionist communalism. So you could have used these as examples to substantiate your answer. You don't need to remember this part. You need to remember these examples. Again, I highlight, do know these examples, and as you see in current affairs or newspaper, add from that. For example, there was a news a couple of days ago of whether presidential rule should be removed from Manipur or not. There the issue is, a lot of the issue is about religion only. So you could have used that example as a fresh example of where the problems with communalism. Now, what they have asked is the evolution of communalism and its impact somewhat, because if you see again, the ethnic group 1, power struggle, deprivation 1, impact of a post-liberal economy 1, these can be connected to evolution. So yes, you need to learn this diagram. I would suggest, it's an easy diagram. In the examples, again, you need to learn. I forgot to mention, this is a diagram I think you should learn. This is just impact of communalism, and in an answer you can practice this way. You can just directly write this. This is not about rote learning. This is about saving you a lot of minutes. Let's say I've asked you this question. Which one? Suitable communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. So what they're saying is that the cause of communalism are 2: power, relative. When you answer this question, what you have to give is explain communalism, what is communalism, what causes communalism. Now they have already given you 2. So what you do is substantiate this. Yes, these things causes communalism. But what you can also do, and what you should be doing, is what else can cause communalism. Now here the interesting thing is they have asked you to argue. How can you argue? There are 2 ways to argue: to disprove the point completely that these things don't cause communalism, or to disprove by saying that yes, these cause communalism, but there are other contributing factors also. In this case, I will ask you to choose the second one, because yes, these things can cause communalism to an extent. So you say yes, they cause, but not always. Why? Because of these reasons, and because these other factors can also be reason. In these situations, if you have such diagrams ready of causes, issues, etc., rather than taking a minute to think about things, you can write it in 10 to 20 seconds, and that really shaves off a lot of time for you to think. In these questions, the thinking time is more important than the time you spend writing. I'm sorry, as important as you spend writing. So, second diagram to remember, examples to remember. Pre-independence. See, a lot of this you already study in modern history and modern history, so you don't need to assess, but do have a look if you think it's not as strong for you, or you see any new word that you can use, or else just read it and be done with it. Post-independence, nothing to read here. Now this is, again, you don't need to remember this. You have a rough idea. These things have been very much in news or in your past, and these are in your memory, so they are not that high a priority. You should know some of them names. Again, here use current affairs. Has there been a major riot in the last couple of years, a major incident, communal outbreak that has happened, use that rather than these examples. These are a backup and mostly known to you. Now, causes of communalism. What I have done here is, if you will see, read this through this thing, it's not much to read. There is just read it, understand it, and leave it. What you need to remember is cause plus example of it. Now for that I made a mnemonic for it, HEMS, which just stands for history, economics, media, social and political causes. You can remember that. You give a vulnerable explanation, then an example. You can always highlight it again to remember it. Otherwise, if you have more, again you can use current affairs here, add those. Similar for consequence of communalism, dupes. To check communalism, now this one I would say to do a bit more in depth. Why? Because these are the solutions, and what can be done is usually an important part of it. Let me see if there was any other question which we could have used it. Okay, we don't have a question per se on this, but I would suggest to look a bit more in depth in this, just because these are government actions and there are more things to learn in this area. After you have revised it once, you don't need to highlight the whole thing, because you will see there's not much to read, but I would suggest to know these better. Plus, you can reuse them in other answers also. This is the part that you need to remember, and I would most probably you would know these already from prelims. For example, Sachar Committee, NHRC, and Mishra Commission, all of these have been asked in prelims, so you should anyways be familiar with them, but you can use them here also. When you're proposing solutions, steps, or what has or hasn't worked, you can also use them. Way forward, again, the explanation is more or less simple. Here what you should do is learn the mostly bold part, and then draw a diagram like we did in the first one. This. The solutions can also look like this, the way forward can also look like this. Just know the bold part and you're done with it. So, this is how I would have asked you to cover the topic. Once you've covered it, read. As I said, read first, don't highlight, don't write anything. You have read the PYQs, now you went back, reread and highlight, and then you revise. So when we did this, what I just showed you was reading it, going through the PYQs, thinking of how you will answer those PYQs, and then highlighting or marking things and then revising it. Now when I'm answering this question, or when I'm revising this topic, what I will do is just revise these parts. By my second or third revision, could be the fourth revision, I should be able to just give one word answers to this, and as I've already shown you before, get to a half a page for communism, because communalism does not require that much. So these notes, any come into handwriting, should be maximum 1 page. I would suggest half a page for a topic which does not have that many questions, and that's about it. So the reading first time, as I said, will take you 30 minutes. The rereading and the PYQs will take you another 30 to 40 minutes, and then the rest of the time you spend revising it. So this was the example. Now let's go to what are your targets for tomorrow. Day 3 gets finished here. Let's see what we can do on day 4. You can, as I said, you can use the template that I've given. Start using it. Do the first revision. Please remember, just because you have read a new thing that day does not mean you skip revision of day 4. Revision keeps piling over. For example, on day 1 you studied women, as I gave the example, and today, day 2, you finished up with communalism. So on day 1, yes, you didn't have topic, you just revised women, but on day 2 when you come to revision, you will revise communalism plus women. Now when you come to day 3, whatever topic you choose, let's say globalization, when it comes to revision, you will choose globalization, which will be the first revision, communalism, which will be the second revision, and women, which will be the third revision. This is your goal for every day. It keeps piling on, so that by the end of 10 days, you have at least for minimum revised some topics for one time and some for over 4 to 5 times, making you very familiar and able to write the answers. That's it for today, guys. I've given you the basic outline of homework tomorrow. Let me know if I can add some other tips or tricks that I can help you with. Thank you.